It's almost as if at the moment people are fighting the wrong war for talent. We tend to fight the war for talent acquisition. How do we get people to join us? But the real challenge, of course, is how do you actually get the most out of the people that have chosen to give their life and their breath to you? How do you get the most out of the people that already work for you? How do we do that? We're looking at 3.6, 3.7% unemployment. And so every company has got to try to make environments and workplaces that are engaging for people, get the most from people, and do so in a way that doesn't burn them out but actually lifts them up. So the ADP Research Institute decided to take this on. What is the most definitive set of things we can say about how do you get the most out of the people that work for you? So here's what we did. We did a 19-country study. We picked 19 countries around the world. We devised a very simple measure of engagement that is reliable and has what's called criterion-related validity, as in we know that people who answer more positively to these engagement questions at time 1 end up doing more productive things at time 2, like greater productivity, higher customer satisfaction, less likelihood to actually leave. So we put that survey out in the world and then ran the data. Exactly the same methodology in every single country. Over 1,000 working adults in a stratified random sample of working adults in each country. And then we controlled for the fact that different countries seem to respond to different scales in a different way. Japanese tend to skew toward the middle. Hispanics tend to skew toward the positive end. The Brits are sort of right in the middle. We controlled for that. So what we ended up with is a way to compare apples to apples to apples to apples to apples around the world in terms of level of engagement. And then we were able to dive in and say, okay, well, what drives it? And the top line summaries for us, number 1, engagement isn't very high around the world anywhere. Somewhere between 15 and 16% of people around the world are fully engaged. That means 85% of us around the world are just coming to work. That probably explains why per-person productivity growth has been trending down significantly for the last 40 years. We do not do a very good job around the world of engaging our people. We just don't. So now is a really good time to say, okay, well, what are we doing wrong and what should we be doing right? So to answer that question, we then drilled into what are the drivers? What drives engagement? What are the component parts? And although we don't have time on this video to go through all of them, the 2 biggest discoveries are, number 1, that what drives engagement is not your length of service. It's not how high up you are. It's not what industry you're in. It's not what country you're in. It's not what your gender is. It's not what your education level is. The biggest driver of engagement or lack of engagement is whether or not you say you're on a team. If somebody says, yes, I do most of my work on a team, they are twice as likely to be fully engaged than if they don't. We could know everything about your gender, your race, your age, your length of service, your country, and still know nothing about how engaged you are until we knew if you were working on a team or not. That's a huge finding for us because companies don't run engagement that way. We try to do all of our engaging initiatives not through teams, but through who reports to who boxes on the org chart, because that's all we can see. And yet when we ask people, are you on more than one team, 66, 65% of people, depends on the country, said that they do work on more than one team, and 3/4 of those people said that those teams, those additional teams, were not reflected in the org chart. So of course what that means is that most work happens on teams, most work happens on dynamic, ephemeral teams, and we can't see the teams. So we can't see the work, so we can't make improvements to the work and the teams, which is probably why the levels of engagement are so low. If companies want to engage more of their people, they've got to look through the lens of teams. They've got to see how many teams exist, who's on them, and then a lot of their prescription and action should be around how can we make more teams like our best teams. Very little work like that is currently being done because we can't see the teams. The second discovery is a more straightforward one, is that the biggest driver of the most engaged teams is whether or not you trust the team leader. Trust the team leader. And it has to be extreme trust. Now, there are a number of other different discoveries as we peeled the data more and more, but certainly those 2 are the big ones. If you want to engage your people, dive into teams. And second, if you want to build highly engaged teams, build trust in the team leader. If you do that well, you'll win the right war for talent.